we were at this big nature preserve, hundreds and hundreds of acres of hiking trails and stuff. And we spent the whole day out there, me with a bunch of colleagues. And we spent a big portion of the day, 6 or 7 hours of the day was spent in silence. And we were just invited to write and walk and sit and think and pray and to be alone. And so that question was my prayer that day, very explicitly, is this right? Am I right? Is this okay? Can I do this? Should I do this? And there was a moment where I walked around a corner on one of the trails that I was on and walked into the butterfly garden. And there were just butterflies everywhere. And I just started laughing because it was like I in that moment, it was like, well, of course, Esther, of course.
Hello, beautiful people. Yes, I am talking to you. Are you ready to feel confident AF, free from the expectations and opinions of others, and create ultimate self-trust in who you are, what you say, and how you show up in every part of your life? If you answered a hell yes, I am, I guarantee this episode will empower you to be 100% yourself, 100% of the time, no shame or guilt needed. It's time for you to strut your stuff, express yourself with freedom, and fully embrace every freaking fabulous part of you. Let's dive in. Hello, my beautiful friends, and welcome to another episode of Road to Radical Visibility. My name is Rachel Freemon Sowers, also known as the Break Free Bitch, because I am passionate about helping people just like you break free from the toxic social constructs, expectations, and beliefs that are keeping you from experiencing your life exactly the way that you want to. And if you've hung out here for very long, you'll know my personal and professional motto is being 100% yourself, 100% of the time, no shame or guilt needed. I have another kick-ass guest. I know I say that every time, and every single one of them is kick-ass, but today is going to be different, and I'm really excited sharing this person that I've met with you. I'm really excited that they are going to be sharing their story here on the Road to Radical Visibility. And it just makes my heart really full. It makes me even a little bit emotional. But before that all happens, because we got to hold up one second, I want to introduce my guest to you. And so I'm going to read her bio right now. Esther Loewen is a California transplant from Walla Walla, Washington, where she has lived most of her life. She gives her heart and soul to expanding inclusion in the world, pressing to create more room at the table of life. Esther's professional life has been filled with 16 years of ordained pastoral ministry in the Protestant Christian church, authoring a book about keeping secrets, gonna want to know more about that, and earning a master's degree in leadership from Fuller Seminary in Pasadena. Also currently works as a trainee marriage and family therapist at the LGBTQ Center of the Desert in Palm Springs, while pursuing a master's degree in Alliant International University. She also produces and hosts the podcast Transgender Woman Talking. We're going to talk about that too. Esther is married to Paige, her life partner of 17 years. They have the joy of parenting two brilliant, creative, and energetic and empathic children, Fenn and Sawyer. Welcome to the show, Esther. Thank you so much for being my guest.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to see you, and it's great to be with you. And hello, radical inclusion, radical visibility listeners. Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's radical visibility is part of the inclusion, right? And so that just leads into my very first question that I ask all of my guests. What does radical visibility mean to you?
Gosh, it's interesting because what is determined radical um,
Mm.
is a lot of times determined by the culture that we're living in. And so
Yes.
I'm very visible as a trans woman, and sometimes that's just being visible, like putting gas in my car is
Mm.
considered radical. And so
Mm.
there's a part of me that's like, okay, I mean, I guess if you need it to be radical for me to be visible, I will be radical. But
Yes.
but really, like, I'm just, parenting and doing what I need to do. Um, but so there's that part of it. But
Mm-hmm.
also, like, yeah, I think that radical visibility can be a gateway to
Mm.
so many of the best things that life has to offer.
Mm-hmm.
You know, um, I love that. There's a phrase, I'm not sure even who originally said it, but like, to be known and hated is like our worst fear, right?
Mm.
Um, to be unknown and to be loved is like, a little bit empty and
Mm.
scary.
Mm-hmm.
But like the best that life has to offer is to be known and to be loved fully. And that's radical visibility. Like that's the opportunity that radical visibility brings us, is this, chance to be fully known and
Mm-hmm.
to be fully loved, which is, God, that's the best feeling in the world.
Yeah.
Like I don't really
Yes.
know like I don't really know a better feeling than that. So it's, yeah.
Well, and I love everything that you just said and about like being known. And you and I have known each other for quite some time, and I've been so honored and blessed. I mean that from the depths of my heart, to watch your journey. And it is about that radical visibility is becoming known to yourself and being seen as yourself in your own life, to right
Mm-hmm.
allowing yourself to show up the way that you wanted. Tell us a little bit about your journey, either through transition or like all of the things, because you are an ordained pastor. And um there's a lot of things that go with that too, so tell us a little bit of your story.
Yeah. Yeah, so I grew up in Washington State as a part of a conservative Christian denomination, the Seventh Day Adventist Church.
Mm.
Woo woo! Just a little call out to my spiritual tribe. Um, and I still feel connected to and love many parts of that culture and that people group, even though those feelings are not always mutually shared.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a bit of like, I don't really know how it's possible to like overcome uh, or to like, just forget that like I was, you know, at the top of the heap in some ways in
Mm-hmm.
that culture, as long as I continued to pretend to be a man. And I
Mm.
was ordained, and I had, um, I pastored for a long time. I pastored for 10 years at the church in Walla Walla, and it's, like 2,000 members, this huge auditorium. I was in charge of putting together the weekly worship services and, just huge productions every week and lots of technology and volunteers and coordinating of people. And it was like a beautiful job. And I really enjoyed doing the work. And I think that we really helped people. Um, but I was entrusted with a lot. And then I was invited to come and pastor up down in Southern California. And I was the lead pastor, and I was preaching every week, 40 times a year. It was like what I had always hoped for. I love preaching. I love teaching. Um, and I had a staff. We had 5 full-time people on staff at the church and a multi-million-dollar yearly budget. And like it was a lot of the things that I had always wanted, but also like felt called to, like felt like was important. And um, so yeah, so I guess I resent a little bit, or maybe a lot, that um, me being trans was like, like I checked all the other boxes and I was trusted in all the other ways, but then like this one, really small part of my life that all of a sudden negated all the rest of that. And um, so I don't really know if I'm still a Christian or an Adventist. Like I don't really know. Like it's hard for me to claim that identity after having gone through that rejection and pain. And maybe I'm just at a different phase in the grief process. I'm not sure, but I still, when I came out as trans, it was a huge grieving process because I loved my career and my career was an identity. Um, and so, yeah, I'm kind of, I don't know if I'm answering your question right, but like that's been a huge part of my, journey is experiencing, um, spirituality and religious community in the context of also going through transition as a 39-year-old person. Now it's 3 years later. I'm soon to be a 42-year-old person. But I kind of, I ended up thrown into this midlife. I don't know. It didn't, well, I guess it was kind of like a crisis where I was given this opportunity to rethink like what I was going to do professionally for the second half of life, and whether I wanted to continue in religious work, or expand that work, or to just shift it or whatever. In the bio you read that my sense of that I live for creating inclusion, and that's still the underlying driver in my life and who I am. Like I love the feeling of helping people know that they have a place and that they're enough, and that they have something to give, and that they're worthy, and that they're seen. Like I love that. And when that was able to happen as I was a pastor, it was like I held on to those moments. Sadly, because of the organization, there were times when I was complicit in like the opposite direction, I guess, whatever the opposite of inclusion is. Like where I, as a representative of the institution, had to be essentially, take away people's place at the table. And so I have a mixed relationship, because like what I went through, there are ways in which I put other people through that,
Yeah.
in some sense.
I think sometimes it's not sometimes, all of us do it because of what we're taught to do, right? And I mean, you've mentioned like several little things in here that are really good to highlight, because we're all in a system and we have that tension, right? I mean, you've talked about religious trauma, because I mean, I've had my own religious trauma, and how so many of our listeners, or the listeners to this podcast, have their own religious trauma, but don't realize that that's actually what's happened, and how we're taught to believe or told to do things in a certain way or be a certain person. And that really doesn't always ring true. And because you want to be true to yourself, like you said, everything else is negated. That's really hard to work through. And it takes I don't want to say a long time, but it takes a minute to work through that.
Yeah. It's been very much like grieving, like a death. It's been, and I've been through the process of grief and death before in my life, multiple times, sometimes really close. And it's conjured that going through this
Mm.
experience. There's been, resonance and similarities, and um, yeah, I wish that um, you know that wasn't the cost of being visible, um, and yet
Well,
sometimes it is, apparently.
mhm. Well, and if that's the cost of being visible, the cost of being visible is denying yourself who you want to be, who you are, how you want to interact in the world for the made
Yeah,
up bullshit constructs of everything
yeah,
else in the world that says you're not supposed to or whatever. It's
yeah,
kind of like we say that we wish it wasn't at that cost, and yet we would probably, I doubt if you would change it now. Like you're like, no, that could be the cost now because I love my life more now than ever before.
yeah, yeah. That's the thing, is that like the pain of being hidden, um,
Mm.
like during the time when we're hidden, we don't fully appreciate just how painful and just how impactful it is,
Yes.
Uh, like when we're in that, when we're hiding, when we're not visible, when we're in the closet, whatever you want to call it, like
Mhm.
there's real pain and trauma that comes along with that.
Yeah.
But but it feels safe and it feels comfortable
Mhm.
at the moment, like in its own way. And so when we don't have anything to compare it to, the fear of loss is like overwhelming. But
Yes.
absolutely, yeah, looking back, it's like, oh God, there's no comparison. Like there's pain either way, but like you say, I completely would choose this pain
Yes. Well, absolutely
because
right.
the
And
joy is so amazing.
mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, it's like that true joy. Like you're like, holy cow, I didn't know it could feel this free in my body, this free in the
yeah.
way that I want to be interacting. What so here's another question for you. What have been some of the most difficult moments to work through during your transition? Yeah, during your transition, what have been some of those most difficult moments?
I mean, certainly grieving the loss of my vocation, but we've
Mm.
already kind of touched on that. It's been uh, one of the things that's happened, and you kind of uh, you know a little bit about this, but it's been painful to uh, like politically in America
Mm.
and in other countries across the world. Um, uh, Trans people have been made into like a political issue in conversation, and maybe
Mm-hmm.
we always have been. Maybe I haven't been aware of it as much until I came out, but I feel like, especially in the last 12 months or so, um, we've become this hot button topic, which is
Mm.
astonishing because there's not that many of us, and like there's lots of other issues that would seem more important, but nevertheless, we've become this, and it's a little bit. It's been really, really hard to
Mm.
be exposed to the conversations that people are having about me,
Mm.
indirectly,
Mm-hmm.
and people like me, and to have like either little voice or to not be believed or to be like dismissed or in some cases by extremists to be wished that we didn't exist
Yeah.
anymore. Like that's been really painful to deal with, and it's brought up a lot of fear. I read uh, Margaret Atwood. maybe 10 years ago for the first time, Handmaid's Tale. And like, it was really disturbing then. And I was white male Christian pastor presenting at the time. So I haven't had the courage to go back and read it now after my, having had the lived experience that I've had the last few years. But I've had lots of visions of Gilead come to mind during this debate, because it feels like we're at that kind of level of precipice, at least for trans people. Like it feels really fragile, and that's really scary, and it feels really hard, and it's a lot to carry around on a day-to-day basis, knowing that these conversations are happening, and also knowing that like I have children to raise, and I have a wife, and I have clients to support, I have my work to do, and like I can't engage in all of that. And so that's been really hard to figure out, okay, where are my boundaries? How much exposure can I allow for myself? There have been moments where there have been days where I was feeling really strong, and so I went in and wrote some comments to support a friend on social media and blah blah blah. But then there are lots of other days where it's like I can't be on there. I can't be reading. Like I've deleted the social media apps from my phone because it's not good for me to constantly be thinking about these conversations that are taking place. And I think a complicating factor as well is that like when I was presenting as cisgender, like I never was cisgender, right? When I was presenting as a man, I never was a man. I played one on TV, or like I pretended to be one, but I was exposed over the years, over and over and over again, to transphobia, right? For people saying really awful negative things about people like me. And at the time, that pushed me further into the closet. And it made the thought or the possibility of transitioning even further away. One of the things that's happened since I've transitioned is that I don't hear that anymore. Almost not at all. Like, I mean, there are like the trolls of just the complete assholes on social media and stuff that say stuff. But like in terms of actual conversations that are transphobic and really disturbing and disgusting, I don't hear them anymore. And I used to hear them all the time. And so that's disconcerting, and it's connected to the political conversation because it's like, it's a weight to carry to know that all of this talking is happening about me and people like me that I am not involved in. I'm not able to give a defense. I'm not able to engage. And gosh, worst yet, like some of these conversations, people are like deciding what my life is going to look like going forward.
Right. And that, I mean, like, I think I don't know obviously what it's like to be a trans person, but I do know what it's like to be shamed and shamed and shamed and shamed and shamed. Right. And that's what pushed you further back in the closet. That's what helps. Yep. That's what makes everyone else repress what ultimately they may want to, how they want to be living their life. I mean, when you hear that these kinds of people are going to hell, and you're like, shit, I might be one of them. I mean, the 4th grade, I kissed a neighbor girl, and I thought for sure I was going to go to hell the very next day. Like, I'm not joking. But I thought for sure. And it's kind of like, and you just have so much turmoil within you that's shaped by all of it. Right. And it is about, people are deciding your life and they're not asking you about it. And they're so concerned about your life. It's like, why don't you mind your own life too?
Yeah.
And pay attention to what you're doing, because I'm not doing anything but helping people over here. A lot of people have discriminated against me in a therapeutic realm where I would have to sit in front of caregivers and they would say, like, gay people are going to hell, like lesbians or child molesters, to my face. Right. And it's like, this is why I love having the show. And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on here, because
Yeah,
there's got to be an awareness made, because this
yeah,
is not acceptable.
yeah,
It's not acceptable at all. We all deserve to live in a way in which we want to live and be
yeah.
honored for being who we are. And it starts with us. Like, what was that moment when you said, I can no longer live as a presenting, cis male in this world? I can't do it. When was that moment? When you said, I have to honor myself.
For me, it was iterative. So it was there were like steps, and there were a lot of questions that I needed to answer for myself in order for it to be really clear. Um, so like I needed to work through like the philosophical stuff. I know it sounds really nerdy, but like I needed to do that. Like, does this even make sense? Like, is there like, like the difference between sex and gender identity, and like, does this even make sense? I needed to do like I needed to pay attention to and do like an inventory, essentially, past and present, of like, what is my actual gender? Because I'd been so shaped by the culture that I was in, and those messages of hell. And, I had been so, like, I didn't even totally know, like, what, are my self perceptions here, like, are these actually accurate? Like, am I somehow deceiving myself? So that I had to attend to that. I needed to attend to a realistic assessment of what the losses might be.
Mm.
Like, what am I going to lose if I do this?
Yeah.
Not that I'm gonna succumb to those fears, but I needed to have them on the table. Like, I needed to know realistically, what am I up against? What's possible? Um, I needed to answer the question, like, is it possible? I wanted to live my life as a woman, for good or for bad. Like, I know that there are lots, I mean, part of the reason trans women aren't trusted is because we give up privilege in order to be true to ourselves. And so that doesn't make sense to a lot of people. And it is, it's crazy, because, like, gosh, I've, yeah, we can talk a long time about privilege and the privilege that
Yes.
I've lost, but I had to, I had to attend to that too. Like, is this even possible? What I want, would I even be happy with the life that I would be living? It's like, as a white man presenting, it's, imagining what life would be like to live as myself, to live as a woman, was a little bit like, well, what would it be like to own a dragon? Like, well,
Yeah.
like, it's a little bit fanciful. Like, you don't totally know until you take that leap. But that was one. And then finally, I personally, and maybe again, because of all those messages that I had been given as well about, God hating me, I needed to have peace with God. I needed to have a sense of spiritual peace that, like, yes, this is the right thing. And so if there was like a domino that toppled, it was that last one. I'd done all the other work, I'd done all those other things, and I was still sort of, I was left at the point of like, yes, this is a real thing. This is legitimate. Yes, these are my experiences. This is what I want. I know what I'm going to lose. I've tasted what life will feel like, and I want it, and it's true, and it's to me. But it was like, is this okay? Can I do this? And so, I spent I was still pastoring then, and I was going through all this process and
Wow.
processing these questions and praying about it. And I was pastoring at the time, and I went on a spiritual retreat up in the foothills outside of my city in Redlands. And we were at this big nature preserve, hundreds and hundreds of acres of hiking trails and stuff. And we spent the whole day out there, me with a bunch of colleagues, and we spent a big portion of the day, 6 or 7 hours of the day was spent in silence, and we were just invited to write and walk and sit and think and
Mm-hmm.
pray and to be alone.
Mm-hmm.
And so that question was my prayer that day, very explicitly. Is this right? Am I right? Is this okay? Can I do this? Should I do this? And there was a moment where I walked around a corner on one of the trails that I was on and walked into the butterfly garden.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know the butterfly garden was there, but there were like just hundreds of butterflies all of a sudden, all these flowers. It was springtime. It was this time a little bit earlier in the year, but similar. And there were just butterflies everywhere. And I just started laughing because it was like I in that moment it was like, well, of course, Esther, of course, transform, transform, fly, do your thing. You are loved. And I just laughed and laughed and laughed, and I prayed and I laughed and I cried, and and from that moment, transition for me felt like this isn't like, oh, can I do this and be okay? It was, if you don't do this, you're not okay. Like it felt like a calling. It felt
Mm-hmm.
like all of a sudden it felt very, very similar to my calling to be a pastor. It was like, no, this is like in some mystical, inexplicable way, God made me this way. And part of my life is to transition.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm being asked to do. And that gave me a lot, like that gave me courage,
Mm-hmm.
because then it's like, okay, well, I can face this shit, because this isn't just like me like gratifying this dirty, filthy, lusty
Right.
desire, fucking whatever, whatever people imagine. Like, no, this is who I am.
Mm-hmm.
So if there was a moment, it was that moment.
Well, and I
and I
loved,
got and I got like marked on my body. I
yeah.
that moment I marked because it was
Mm-hmm.
so significant. Like
Mm.
I'll hold that with me forever.
I love what you said about turning the corner, and it was like, in those moments it's like, of course, that's one of the things I love hearing. One of the things my clients say often is that they get to a point when they're like, well, of course this is my life, of course this is happening to me. And I don't mean like this is happening to me in a bad way, but of course I can expand, of course I can say what I need to say, of course I can have what I want to have, of course you know what, it's just like keeps going and
Yeah,
going.
yeah, yeah.
So tell me, in the little bit of time that we have left, what have you truly been able to experience because of your transition, and what helped you do that?
Hmm. Um. Gosh. So my mind is drawn to my wife. We've been married, like you said in the bio, for 17 years, almost 18. And, uh, you know, the prospect of transition is met with different feelings for different couples. So it's not the same for everyone. Um, but in our case, our marriage and our intimacy and our connection and our commitment has never been stronger, ever.
Mm-hmm.
And um, she was the first, other than my therapist, that I really hadn't even fully come out to. It was like we were sorting through it, but she was the first one that I actually really came out to. And like, honestly, there had been other like coming outs with her over the course of our life. Like, she knew all kinds of stuff about me and my life and the things that I've been through. And but like, to be to be present with her in that moment where she fully knew, and where she wasn't running away. In fact, she was happy for me and for us. Um, I don't know if there's anything better in life. I mean, to take it back to the beginning of the show, like, I mean, that's been, our deepening relationship has been just irreplaceable. And it wasn't possible prior to transition, because there was this whole part of me that I was too scared to I mean, God, I was too scared to even explore it myself, but certainly too scared to share it with her. I mean, when I told her, what I said was, I'm afraid I might be transgender, which was the truth. But like, I had not allowed myself to even be honest with myself for fear of losing her.
Yeah.
And it's only gotten deeper.
Well, and the two of you have done a lot of work.
Yeah.
Separately.
Yeah, well,
I mean, like,
absolutely.
you've done.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of work for sure. And I think, a close second to that in terms of what transition has brought is like, I talked about that fear, like, what am I going to lose? That answering that question. And I knew I was going to lose a lot of people. But part of the leap of faith that transition became to me was trusting that even in the loss of some relationships, that there would be a community that I didn't know and that I hadn't really met would be there to catch me, and that there would be allies that would show up through the woodwork. And like, I was a conservative Christian white man pastor. Those people did not feel comfortable being around me or trusting. Like, I was not, it wasn't like, I wasn't like, I didn't like, oh, well, I'm gonna go be with the queer community because they are so accepting. And like, there's this portrait that's sometimes painted by the church, and it's like, no, like, the queer community for me, they were, it was like my safety net. I was rescued and scooped up when I was fucking pushed out of the nest. Like, and like, so there's so many relationships that I've built, and so many new friendships and connections, and so many amazing people and stories. Like, I work in an LGBTQ behavioral health center, and I mean, my job every week, I'm in school full time still, so I'm only seeing 12 or 15 people a week, but I get to hear these amazing stories about people who lived through incredible times, dark, who set the stage for me to be able to live the life that I'm living now. It's so humbling to get to sit with and to hear stories and experience people. Like, the amount of people and community that have shown up through the woodwork has been stunning, and it's such a gift, and it would not have been possible without. Well, and I'm so grateful, and you're part of that.
Thanks. It's really has truly been an honor to help guide you through your own process, and watching you reconsider and let go of the beliefs that were taught to us. I mean, they don't just go away just
Yeah.
like that. Like they don't, I mean, like I'm over here as a therapist, been doing therapy for 25 years, and I do this kind of work for a living and I help people. And yet at the same time, there are still those things that come because it was taught to us for so long. I mean, I'm 51 years old now. Like that's like 5 decades.
Yeah.
Like that's a long time. And like I feel like what you're saying, that all of us at some point in life face a moment when we have to start making the decisions that honor us. And like yours was incremental, right? Some people
Mhm.
just, and it is really how to create that trust, that faith, that internal way of being for yourself, so that you can say, I'm having the faith that this will show up. I'm trusting this process. I'm trusting myself in the process. And there is a
Mm.
way you can grow to trust yourself ultimately. And you had talked about several times about how even just going out in public was a real test for you, because there was all the fears that I've heard several times from other people
Yeah.
that that I've worked with. And every time that you did, you came out just a little bit brighter, and you're like, it's just it's an
Yeah.
amazing journey to watch you. I mean, like, I want to be here for inclusivity also. Like, and
Yeah.
that's one of the reasons why I'm so happy that you decided to be a guest on the show, because this is what
Yeah.
I want more of on this show. I want more real lives showing up here and saying, hey, you know, this is how I choose to live. And if you want to live the way you want to, you can, whatever that means
Hmm.
for a
Yes.
person.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So,
Yeah. You can.
yeah, as we wrap up here, we have just a couple more minutes left. But what would you want to tell any other transgendered people who are struggling out there right now? What is something you'd want to tell them?
You are enough.
Mm,
You can do it. And uh, you may feel regrets, or you may feel despair at moments, and those are valid. And and you are enough,
mhm.
and you can do this, even
Yep.
with that. And um, uh, yeah, that's I guess that's my message. Like, we need you.
Mm,
The
mm-hmm,
world needs you.
mm-hmm,
You have beautiful, beautiful wisdom and gifts and stories and art and healing to offer the world. Trans people are um, magical and spiritual in a crazy, crazy way.
mm-hmm,
And you have so much to give. And I'm so sorry that we live in a world that um, doesn't honor that all the time, or maybe infrequently honors that.
mm-hmm,
And yet that doesn't negate the fact. And so my message to you is keep going, take care of yourself, pull people
mm-hmm,
around you who love and see you, have courage as you um, put up boundaries to protect yourself,
mm-hmm,
and just hang in there. It's gonna, I swear, it's gonna get better.
mm-hmm,
We're gonna make it, even as dark as it looks. Sometimes we're gonna make it,
mm-hmm.
and um, and we're gonna love each other along the way, and we're even gonna love the people who hate us, because it's like it's infectious. And I mean, God, like, how could you not love us? We are incredible, incredible people, and I have so much respect and happiness for you. So don't give up.
Yeah, I think I love that message. And if you are listening to this episode and or watching this episode and you're not trans, but there are points in your life when you feel like you want to give up, you don't have to do anything to deserve or to prove what you want in your life and who you want to be. You do not have to
Yeah,
do that. And, if you want to keep being encouraged and inspired, subscribe to the podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you're trans, check out Esther's podcast that is called Transgender Woman Talking Podcast. Check that out. If you're looking for support, you can reach out to both Esther and myself, because we are here to honor who you are and you living your life exactly the way that you want to. Okay, my friends. Well, I am going to end this episode here like I end every single episode. Please make sure to stay true to yourself, be kind to others, and always, always, always honor the 100% you. I hope that you all have a great, wonderful day, and I'll see you on the next road to radical visibility. Until then, bye.
Bye-bye.
Hold up, don't go yet. If this episode inspired you to be 100% yourself, 100% of the time, no shame or guilt needed, even just that little bit more, I would love to hear from you in the comments below. I'm here, and I know you are too, to make a positive impact in the world. So don't forget to share the love. And if you were left wanting more of this type of kick-ass content, then don't forget to click the like and subscribe button. Until next time, make sure to stay true and be you. Until then, bye.